Please welcome to the stage Paul Noglos, founder and executive producer, Forbes AgTech.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the Forbes AgTech Summit Indianapolis. Based on initial feedback, I understand that everyone had just a simply tremendous day yesterday. We visited the R&D facilities of Corteva Agriscience and Elanco, and then we spent the afternoon out at Beck's Hybrids, where we did 10 different field demos. We are so excited to be here in Indianapolis. This is our 5th Forbes AgTech Summit, but it's our first in the Midwest. If I leave you with one thought, it would be this. The Forbes AgTech Summit is not a futuristic conference. We unfortunately do not have the luxury to spend our time focusing on 2050. Rather, the summit is a showcase of ideas and a marketplace of agricultural innovation. An innovation that growers and processors can put to work in their fields and in their plants today, not 25 years from now. The goal, to improve both their bottom lines and their livelihoods. The Indianapolis Summit builds upon and complements the Salinas Summit, which we have staged annually for the last 4 years. And it's fun because it expands our focus beyond specialty produce to include row crops. With that, I'd like to thank our sponsors for making these wonderful gatherings possible. First and foremost, our host sponsors, Indiana Economic Development Corp. And AgriNovus Indiana. They have been true partners in every sense of the word. And it is these two organizations that are most responsible for bringing the Forbes AgTech Summit to Indianapolis, Indiana, and the Midwest. And thanks to our presenting sponsors, Corteva Agriscience and Elanco. Like I mentioned before, they both hosted wonderful tours of their R&D facilities, and we appreciate it very much. Hopefully you walk through the innovation showcase. We have 50 of the world's best, most compelling ag tech startups, and our sponsor for the showcase is Purdue University. Purdue has been steadfast in their support, and we couldn't think of a better partner to promote all that's going on in ag tech. Our partner sponsors are Bayer, Michigan Economic Development, Agriculture, Winfield United. Our Indianapolis business leader sponsors are Aggressively Organic, Beck's Hybrids, Cummins, Ernst & Young, Ice Miller, Illinois Soybean Association, Indy Partnership, a business unit of the Indy Chamber, Reynolds Farm Equipment, and Trace Genomics. Our venue sponsor is beautiful White River State Park. Our program partners are Better Food Ventures, the Mixing Bowl, and our new program partner, iSelect Fund. They put on Davos on the Delta. And last, but certainly not least, our founding partner, SVG Partners and its Thrive Accelerator. As I pointed out last night at the opening reception, it was John Hartnett who invited me out to Salinas over 5 years ago and introduced me and Forbes to the dynamic world of ag tech. It's hard for me to believe, standing up here this morning, that we are already hosting our 5th Forbes AgTech Summit. But the pace of ag tech innovation continues to increase, as does the critical need for it to do so. With that, it is my honor and privilege to welcome to the stage the chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, Steve Forbes.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, and thank all of you for being here today. Thanks to all of you who are making this event possible. As Paul said, this is our 5th Forbes AgTech Summit, first here in the Midwest, first here in Indiana, Indianapolis, and it's fitting that we're here today. Obviously, California is part of agriculture, but a different emphasis and focus than what we find here in the Midwest. So covering both, people don't realize ag is huge, and we want to make sure we're covering it all, not only California, but here in the real belt of prosperity and food for the world, right here in Indiana. Indiana itself is an ag powerhouse. As you well know, because you live here, but perhaps you don't fully appreciate it, you've got a fantastic transportation hub, really a crossroads of America, over 11,000 miles of road, over 4,000 miles of railroad. You've got the 7th largest cargo business here in Indianapolis, cargo, FedEx and the like. Also, too, you have, I was amazed to read, 3 deep water ports, which export over $1.5 billion products each year. So you produce an abundance of corn, soybeans, poultry, eggs, meat animals, dairy, hardwood. You have over 4.8 million acres of forest, amazing. Aquaculture, wineries. No one has given me a free bottle of wine yet, but I hope that'll change. 30 different fruits and vegetables. We can tell I'm of Scottish descent, so, as long as I don't get charged for in-kind income by the IRS, I'm always up for freebies. But Indiana's also become a leader, as you well know, in Agbiosciences. It's recognized with the state of California as one of the only 2 states to have 3 out of 5 national life science sectors right here, large and specialized. Indiana's universities are global leaders in ag research. Proudly, we're having Mitch Daniels here in a few minutes. In 2018, Purdue was ranked #1 nationally for biological agricultural engineering by U.S. News and World Report. Purdue's College of Agriculture, saw the dean earlier this morning, is ranked 5 worldwide, amazing ranking. The Indiana ag bioscience industry employs over 75,000 people. That's not including primary farm production workers. The whole ag bioscience industry is growing at a rate of 20% a year, compounded. That's amazing. And with innovations in things like 3D printing and drone technology, Indiana is helping fuel a revolution in precision agriculture. We did an article about 1.5 years ago on drones for farmers, making the Midwest a flying success in terms of that kind of precision agriculture. So major things are happening. I was interested to read that the Indiana Agricultural Technology School is a new charter school for kids 7th grade through 12th that focuses primarily in ag technology, career pathway training, licensing. They've had a little bit of a snag, but they're still moving ahead. The Indiana Corn Marketing Council doing programs and research, marketing and the like. We had yesterday Beck's Hybrid Atlanta, these demonstrations, seeing it actually in the field. Extraordinary what is happening. So the whole ferment, you might say, you can tell where my mind is when I use the word ferment, but the whole ferment in ag and technology, really people don't realize, we think of ag as modern high-tech technology, Silicon Valley and the like, but it goes back to the great breakthrough they made in the plow in Europe over 1,000 years ago, which vastly increased output. The way they use fields. You all know the storied history of John Deere in the Midwest and the plow that took this soil that was very unpromising because it stuck to the plow, came up with one that didn't, the McCormick Reaper, hybrid seeds, refrigeration, and one of the greatest robots in history. Everyone's afraid of robots these days, but one of the biggest robots in history was the tractor. We didn't call it a robot, so nobody feared it, but it literally freed up millions of acres of land that had been used to grow forage for animals for other uses. And as a matter of fact, if you took the way we did food, did agriculture in 1960, when we were pretty good in the world, leading the world, if we use those same methods today, we'd have to use 80% of the world's entire land mass to produce adequate food. The productivity has been amazing. So obviously we don't use 80% of the earth. We use less land today than we did over half a century ago. Productivity goes I think, doesn't get the respect it should. This whole hullabaloo, I'll be discussing it with President Daniels shortly, about GMO, Frankenfoods, stuff and the like. Again, we've been doing this, trying to get more productivity in agriculture long before Frankenstein came along, and it's been ongoing. And as I mentioned to some of you in Salinas a couple of months ago, perhaps we should stop using these scary words like artificial intelligence, which makes it sound like these machines are going to take us over and render us useless. As somebody pointed out, we don't refer to airplanes as artificial birds. We don't refer to cars as artificial horses. So let's get over this crazy terminology. But having 50 fabulous startups here in this tent, 20 of them with Purdue, it's extraordinary, the ferment that is here. And one of the things, we talked about it briefly this morning with some people, is when we think of high tech, we think of inventions and new things. But the key thing is how you apply these breakthroughs, how you use these inventions. And what you're finding is more and more so-called legacy industries, and the greatest legacy one is agriculture. That's where high tech is really flourishing. You see it in energy. They call it fracking and other breakthroughs, but you see the startups coming now in energy, nothing to do with the traditional energy industry, but they see ways of doing things, measuring things that have never been possible before, which means that within a few years, the U.S. will not only be the biggest oil and gas producer in the world, but perhaps the lowest cost next to the Saudis' energy producer in the world because of these breakthroughs. You're seeing the same thing here. You're seeing the same thing in agriculture, ag innovation. So the work of industry, universities, scientists, government scientists, private sector scientists and engineers, extraordinary promise ahead. We all know the challenge. We all know that in 2060, we're going to have to feed 2.5 to 3 billion more people in the world. Some see that as a crisis, but with the kind of innovation represented here today, it is an opportunity. Because not only will we be producing more, but the variety and quality is going to vastly exceed the increase in populations. We've seen here and around the world, when people get more incomes, they not only want more food, but more and infinite variety of foods. I was mentioning this morning, show how crazy some of this can go. There's a restaurant in New York City, it's New York, but hey, it's illustrative, that claims it has the best coffee maker in the world. He's a guy. And he will make a cup of coffee for you that's supposedly the best in the world for the low price of $40. I mean, I hope Starbucks doesn't hear about this because you know what happened to their prices. But $40, I couldn't drink it. I'd feel guilty. It's bad enough paying $20 for a venti latte in the morning, but you know. But it's extraordinary what is unfolding. And so, 10 billion people, it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And this is why, and we'll chat a little bit about this morning, we must not put up artificial barriers, whether it's unfounded fears like GMOs and Frankenfoods, instead of seeing it as enabling people with the least to not only produce but feed and get fed in ways that never would have been possible a few years before, or artificial trade barriers. I'll just close with this thought. Tariff is another word for sales tax. And while there's some trade abuses in the world, there are right ways to deal with them, laser-like approaches, but I don't believe, you can tell I'm not running for anything, putting sales taxes on ourselves is the way to deal with those abuses. Remove those barriers and we'll all prosper even more and be more well-fed than ever before. So thank you very much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you the 51st Governor of the state of Indiana, Eric Holcomb. We're going to have a nice conversation up here.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm tempted. Well,
Let loose with your desire.
cold beer. I'll just leave it at that. But so let's
Sunday sales, or do you said cold beer?
cold beer. But let's start just to get your quick thoughts, and then I want to get into what you're doing here in Indiana. You're already a crossroads of America, but you're doing more to make sure that doesn't fade away, in fact moves ahead, is tariffs, the impact, and what you think will be the likely outcome. Will this thing be resolved and we can move ahead? But how are tariffs affecting not just ag, but autos and everything else?
Well, it affects us all globally, and I'm optimistic that, yes, there will come a resolution, and we're obviously playing hardball. This has gone on for decades and decades, and we want to make sure that it is not just rhetorical to say that it should be a free and fair level playing field. And so the administration has taken this head on, and I was encouraged by some news that came out last night and discussions. And so with each of those updates, I think we get closer to a final resolution, and it will serve Indiana well to be able to compete on that free and fair level playing field.
Well put. Now, in terms of initiatives you're taking here in the state of Indiana, this one affects not only Indiana generally, but certainly helps agriculture, is completing I-69, which is talking about North American free trade.
Yeah.
This road, when complete, first describe people who are not familiar with I-69, what it should be and where it's at now and how you propose to make it a reality, so we do have that seamless road from Canada to Mexico.
Sure. Yeah, if you're from Indiana, sometimes we tend to think it's connecting Evansville down on the Ohio River to the capital city where we sit right now, Indianapolis. But it really is, as you say, connecting three countries. We have been able to, since one of my predecessors, who you'll hear from shortly, Mitch Daniels, going back into when we leased the Indiana Northern Toll Road, we were able to take that $3.85 billion, other people's money, so to speak, and then plow that into projects that have been gathering dust and sitting on shelves and talked about for not just years, but decades, I-69 being one of them. And so we're through Section 5, Evansville, toward Indianapolis. We're up to Martinsville, Indiana. So we've got Section 6, one final segment to complete. We just renegotiated the toll road lease. This is the third time this has been negotiated. And Indiana is in receipt of, over the course of the next few years, $1 billion cash. So we're not going to have to debt finance. We took $600 million of that $1 billion and assigned it to completing I-69, not in 2027 as it was on the books, but in 2024. So ahead of schedule, under budget, and we won't be that missing link on I-69 connecting these three countries of commerce.
How's that going to impact agriculture, having that seamless?
Well, obviously, our road system, as you mentioned, being the crossroads of America, isn't just our motto, it's our mission. And our economy rests on or relies on our infrastructure being superior. And we are in the good situation to where we have the resources to invest and reinvest, not just build new projects, but maintain what we have at the local level and at the state level. And so when you look at all modes of travel, roads being critically important, we're on top of that. But we also, with this $1 billion assigned, which should be of great interest to the ag community at large, we also assigned $100 million to helping build out broadband internet access, affordable access. Purdue University, another plug for my predecessor, Purdue University recently put out a study that said that 93,000 Hoosiers were living in internet darkness. Okay, so that's that unserved territory. There's also an underserved territory. And so it's 93,000 times another factor. And so what we're able to do now is help the business model, help our providers connect Hoosiers living in rural Indiana. We're 83% farmer forest in the state of Indiana, and so think about connecting folks who have not been. I hear these stories about parents taking their kids to McDonald's or Starbucks to get on the Wi-Fi to do their homework at night. That shouldn't be. Fortunately, in the state of Indiana, we have the means and the will and the courage to follow through on this and connect all Hoosiers, one Indiana, to the global marketplace, and that means roads. You mentioned our ports, our airport. You probably flew in, again, to the #1 ranked airport in North America for the last 6 straight years. So when you talk about our ports, air, and water.
I feel like kidnapping it to Newark.
Yeah, and we're seeking to add more, not just domestic, but international flights. We just announced on May 25th, took the flight, our first transatlantic non-stop flight to Europe, to Paris. And it's not just about tourists, it's about cargo, it's about filling the bellies of those planes, and it's also about carriers being able to avoid certain airports where, and you may be thinking of some of them, where there's always a delay or a cancellation. Some are close by.
Yes. Might say it's so hairy, but anyway. One of your initiatives, which obviously impacts a lot of things, but including agriculture, is you want computer science.
Yes.
In education.
Well, if you want to be around, you need to do more of that, obviously. But this was in response to not just the changing world and the scale and the pace of change, but this was in response to how do we tend to our ecosystem and make it as attractive as our tax or our regulatory environment. And as you mentioned, robots rising up and doing more work than humans, how do we humans, there's an on-off switch there.
Yep.
And we are the inventors, we are the discoverers, we are doing the research and development. And so as demand for products increases, as we get safer and faster and more efficient at everything we do, as products get more personalized, including our food sources, we'll be printing food here, and you'll be ordering your food not just on the computer, but you may be printing it at home. And so we want to make sure that our workforce, our citizens here in the state of Indiana, we're the designers of that technology. And that means making sure our tax environment is attractive for investment. That's what that means. Our regulatory environment has to be welcoming. That means that we need to be partnering with, look, we've got Genesis and Wipro and Emphasis is hiring 3,000 folks here in Indiana now. Salesforce, the biggest concentration of Salesforce employees outside of San Francisco is right downtown. Their name is on the tallest building in the state of Indiana, right in the heart of the heartland. And so we're embracing not just this interest, but this investment. Because it's going to be investing in our people ultimately, but it's about the ecosystem and doing all that we can to cultivate and foster that environment.
We'll soon find out, I guess, if there's an Amazon in your future, but even without Amazon, it sounds like you're going to do extremely well.
We are.
Tell us about the Next Level Trust Fund.
Well, that's when you look at all the assets that you have, you also have to, if you don't, it's at your own peril. You have to look at your threats or your disadvantages. And one of the, in the column of need to get to is venture capital access in the state of Indiana. And so we took $250 million geared at encouraging more innovation, more entrepreneurship, and created a fund that invests in new startups, small, mid-cap, mid-size companies with, yes, a higher risk, but yes, a higher yield that goes with that. And so now all of a sudden, this is a fund-to-fund type investment. Now all of a sudden we've taken care of, and that's attracted more. We're already starting to invest in Indiana pursuits, and it's working. And so the thing that I believe separates Indiana from much of the competition is, we don't just admire our disadvantages or our problems, we deal with them. And they create new opportunities for us, and voila, the state of Indiana has become this hub in the Midwest for high-tech investment. And we're not just competing against Silicon Valley, we're complementing their efforts, and we're connected to them, connected to those markets, whether it be Austin or Boston or San Francisco. And that fund goes a long way in ushering us toward that goal.
How do you get the kind of people in who can really get the most out of this and not get mired in ignorance or cronyism or all the other stuff that's plagued some other states? How do you keep this working the way you want it to work? Well,
you have a plan and you stay focused on it. You make sure you protect your attractive environment. You're talking about recruiting. This is something that we wake up every day and get at. And it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. Fortunately, we live next to Exhibit B on how not to do it to the west of us. And when you think about all that we have to offer and our in-migration numbers, we turned a very important corner recently where our in-migration is outpacing our out-migration to the tune of 52-48%. Just to the west of us in Illinois, they're at 30-68. A negative number, and leadership matters, opportunity matters, paying your bills.
You're open for refugees from Illinois. Right?
Oh, we welcome the talent. Look, we're double tracking a South Shore rail line up there to help folks move over. And come on, the grass is greener on this side of the border. I can assure you that.
One of the things you well know is that things just don't happen. You have to go out and make them happen. You mentioned Infosys. That's an amazing story of how that came to Indiana, just by people pursuing. You've taken a number of international trips, not just to the usual suspects like China, but you've done Hungary, Poland, Italy, and other areas. Walk us through what your strategy is here, going to areas that some might overlook, and what you're getting from it. This is softball, but this guy deserves it. He's delivering.
Well, we're winning, so I'm not going to tell you our strategy. No, I'm kidding. Look,
maybe you could share it with a certain football team.
We're not trying to rule the world, but the world is run by people who show up, and we do our homework, and we then pounce on opportunity. And this is about developing, at the end of the day, relationships. And so of course some of those countries that you just ticked off, some of those trips are in part to say thank you for your friendship and your partnership and all that we've accomplished and how we've grown together over the years. Some of those trips are developing government to government relations and business to business and people to people. Our universities are scattered all over, have outposts all over the world. So there's cultural exchanges that are going on as well. But we are looking at, as the markets change, as the world gets smaller and smaller and closer to you, we're looking at developing those relationships. The most recently you mentioned, I just returned, was from Italy earlier this week. And when you think about where we are, the motor sports capital of the world, the greatest spectacle in racing. We were in Motor Valley in Italy with Maserati and Ferrari and Lamborghini and Dallara, who's already deeply rooted here. We're looking at growing those relationships, but you got to show up. This is not a mail it in or wait for it. And every time I go somewhere, I always ask, what of my cohorts, the competition, who's been here most recently? And many of the times, folks say they can't remember, especially if you're off the beaten path. And so, as markets change, we're gonna chase the market.
Before we let you go, quickly, what you've done, your predecessor did first with state employees, and then what you're doing with Medicaid. Yeah. Describe equivalent of health savings accounts.
Well, we're trusting people to make decisions with their money. and surprise, surprise, it works. And it's not just fiscally responsible, but it's increasing health outcomes, which is maybe the most gratifying part of it all. But absolutely, it manages costs. And I'm quite frankly just surprised that more others haven't followed suit or followed in our footsteps. But again, as you mentioned, if they don't want to follow our strategy to prosperity, then so be it.
Yeah, just it's amazing what you've done in that area. The realization when people control the resources, you get less waste, you get better outcomes. And again, I'm just amazed other governors haven't imitated what you guys are doing here.
Yeah, it's amazing when you trust people what they can do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Governor.
Yep. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage the president of Purdue University, former governor of Indiana. When I call him President Daniels, I just wish it was a bigger president, but we'll take Purdue for now.
And it's Steve.
We'll have to begin asking the most important question. You still motorcycle?
Yeah, I'm half there. This is sort of a guy story. The 5 women in the family have been lobbying over the years, Dad, when are you going to grow up and quit this? And so I actually sold one of the 2 this year, but at the last minute I couldn't part with the other one. So yes, I'm still on 2 wheels.
And having been, I love your story about, not story, but your insight about the difference between the political world and the academic world. Can you share that with us, if those who haven't heard your insight there?
Sometimes I say in my last life it was dog eat dog, and in the university life it's just the opposite. There are both wonderful opportunities. I feel very fortunate. I tell all my Purdue friends that at this stage, if you get to spend all day hanging out with young people and smart people, that's a pretty good assignment. We have fabulous young people at our university, very purposeful. Obviously, many of them looking forward to careers in agriculture, agribusiness, agricultural technology. It's especially fun to be around them and listen to what they expect to do in their lives.
Well, just among the other great things, result of what you and Purdue are doing, you have the most World Food Prize winners in the world. Mentioned earlier, your #1 ranking with U.S. News. Your college is one of the top ranked in the world. And so share with us some of the specifics of what you're doing to attract students to ag technology, which is a wide open field, as you well know.
They're finding the traction, I think, themselves. Appreciate your mentioning both our past and our present in this area. Right now on our campus, one of those World Food Prize winners, actually all 3 of our recent ones are there. There's a big conference about the size of this one about scaling up ag technology to feed eventually 8 or 9 billion people. And our place is a constant a venue or forum for discussing these issues, the new technologies, how to spread them to the parts of the world that need them most. And I think that students, not just in our state, but internationally, recognize that Purdue is, if that's a great, noble quest you want to be a part of, there's no better place to come prepare.
We have our innovation showcase, 50 startups, 20 of them sponsored through Purdue. How do you support startups? How do you create the environment where people feel it feeds on itself, as you know? We've seen that in California and elsewhere. Once it starts, it can become a very virtuous circle. How do you encourage and feed that?
Steve, it's such an important question, and I was naive to this when I first changed jobs a few years ago. At our school and in many others, it's still the case. Historically, it's not only not been encouraged, entrepreneurship, interaction with the private sector, it was actively discouraged. Generations of academics were told that it would hurt your career if you dirtied your hands in commerce somehow. And then there was a period where I know a lot of our faculty say that people said, well, it may not hurt you, but it won't help. Concentrate on your publications and your research. We've taken a very different outlook, and it took a little learning, but it started by taking down barriers. You can now, as a Purdue inventor, whether you're a faculty member or a student, sign a very inventor-friendly agreement in 5 minutes. We're not particularly concerned about being defensive of Purdue's interest. We're not really, our goal is not royalties and revenue in the short term, and not that much of it anyway. Our entire incentive structure is now built to create as many new shots on goal as possible, that is to say, as many new businesses. I'm really proud of our young ag students and our faculty. We've been having, the number of new companies starting on the Purdue campus is multiplied 5 times in the last 5 years. Every year now, a third or more of those new businesses are in the ag tech sector.
Just one little digging into that. And you mentioned royalties and things. What have you done specifically differently than other universities where instead of getting hung up, are we getting 29.5% or 52.8%, that in effect says, we may get a little bit, but the world's going to be better off, go to it? You've
just explained our philosophy, and I think the single most important corner that we turned. I was there for a little while. I heard stories like this. One professor told me, he said, I had to borrow money on my Visa card to hire a lawyer to go negotiate with my university for 8 or 9 months while the 1-year patent clock was ticking. So I said, well, whatever the right answer is, that's not it. And we've taken all that down. Again, first we lowered the barriers, and secondly, we put a lot of supportive infrastructure in place to help people with every stage of the business building process, from business plan to entrepreneurs to help coach the business as it tries to get airborne. And again, our entire objective and the compensation of the people who work on this has not tied anything with a dollar sign. It's about how many new patents, how many new licenses, how many new companies. And I've told them if we can get those things up, first of all, we're serving an important objective, I think, of any modern research university, which is to create innovation that's useful in the economy. And secondly, if we do that really well for a number of years, something good will happen to Purdue. Somebody will invent the next, the Intel of agriculture and give us a big check one day.
Yes, hint. Entrepreneurs out there, when you get rich and on our billionaires list. But you love metrics to see not just good feelings, but share some of the metrics that excite you on what's happening here.
You mean across the board and what we're doing? Well, of course we look at student success, so we're trying always to increase our graduation rates. We track their success in the economy 2 years, 5 years, 10 years out. This is really what's important. Did we produce more and more productive citizens and business people and people to go contribute in the productive sector? But I've already mentioned the contributions we hope to make directly to the economy. We're very, very interested in these days in I need a more elegant term for this, but throughput, which is another metric, is the speed. How quickly can we get somebody to a new degree, a new level of learning, a new credential? And a lot of our degrees now are available in 3 years, if a student wants to. We can map it out, and so one thing I'm tracking very closely now is the average time to degree. A student who moves through more quickly, number one, gets another, let's say, year of income to compound over his or her life, not trivial. Two, shows the world, shows a future employer what a go-getter they are. And three, saves a lot of money on tuition, which is another thing we've been working hard on.
Talking about tuition, share the story of when you first became president of Purdue and got the idea not to increase tuition every year, and the reaction first of the admissions department when they heard this radical proposal.
Well, thank you for leading the witness. When I arrived in 2013, green as grass, and not knowing any better, but I suggested the next tuition decision was about due, and I suggested hesitantly that what if we took a year off? There had been 36 straight years of tuition increases, and don't snicker because your alma mater was doing the same thing, and. There, of course, was the expected bureaucratic reaction, oh gosh, we'll have to turn out the lights and so forth. And I knew not to believe that. But the interesting reaction was the one you asked about. Our admissions people, in all sincerity, said, oh, gee, Mitch, if you do that, if we stand still while all our competitors are raising prices again, people will think that we don't have confidence in our product. And that's an interesting thing. In businesses you're familiar with, you raise your price, you lose customers, or but in higher ed, in the absence of any proof of quality, people had been, some are still, associating a higher price with quality. If it costs more, it must be a better school. So our experience has been very different. We're now in the 6th year of no tuition increase. Next May, our 4th of what will be at least 5 classes will graduate having never seen a tuition increase. And it's working the other way. Demand for Purdue education has gone up big time every year.
Just to emphasize that, quickly give the tuition for in-state and then out-of-state students. And parents, you'll break down and cry when you hear these low prices.
In-state tuition is $99.92. And out-of-state's about 3 times that.
$28,000.
Yeah, I have to add that we also have reduced the cost of room and board 10%, and also found a way to make books less expensive. So those are the 3 most costly things.
You're doing that through Amazon, right?
Huh?
You're doing that through Amazon, the book?
Yeah, we had a deal with Amazon that saves about 30% for the students who use that to get their textbooks. Anyway, the upshot of all that is that it'll be less expensive because we are pledged to at least 1 more year of freeze. It'll be less expensive to attend our university in nominal, unadjusted dollars in 2020 than it was in 2012. But we're doing just fine.
And talking about innovation, you were shocked again, the traditionalists, when you bought Kaplan. Walk us through that, now Purdue Global.
So Kaplan University was a proprietary online university. You may well have heard of it. It was one of the bigger ones out there. They made an independent decision to exit the proprietary space, which was under pretty relentless regulatory attack and criticism from the previous national administration. Meanwhile, we were restless that, first of all, there was a huge unmet need that we were responsible for. Now, Purdue University is a land-grant school. Everybody in ag's familiar with those. You know what a noble assignment we have, which is from the very beginning, which is democratize higher ed and spread it beyond the wealthy and the privileged. Well, these days, you can't serve that mission if you stop at age 22. there are twice as many Americans, between 35 and 40 million, who started college and didn't finish. I'm not talking about people who quit after high school. They actually tried to go through college, didn't get there. Twice as many of them as all the 18 to 24-year-olds on college campuses. So that's why we did this, because the market for what is now called Purdue Global is a working adult, probably a woman, likely as not to be a minority, juggling a job, family, who knows, possibly taking care of a parent too. And we're eager to begin helping some of those people. You know, our governor has marked off workforce uplift and education as a #1 priority, and this is our way of trying to participate in it. I guess the last thing I'll say, and business people will understand, this was a make or buy type decision. We looked hard at whether we could build this capability ourselves, and we just weren't any good at it. We were slow and getting in our own way, and so we decided to acquire it instead.
You also are cognizant of community. In the final seconds, share with us this innovation district that.
Yeah. Well, we are blessed with a lot of land around the campus. We have a very pro-business and pro-interaction with business, especially agribusiness outlook. And so we are, with the help of the state, we're planning to, over the course of time, to see a blossoming of new investment in businesses. We just cut the ribbon on an engineering, power engineering company just last week. And we believe this is part of the responsibility these days of a land-grant school, not only to send highly qualified new talent out into the world, but to give birth to innovation and the kind that leads to greater wealth and opportunity for our fellow citizens.
Mr. President, Governor, who knows what the future holds, thank you very much.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.